OK, so we've been hearing during the programme about the vote, which the Prime Minister has just won against rebel members of Parliament in her own party.
But it was a narrow thing. The government won by just 6 votes. We're joined by Henry Newman of Open Europe and The Spectator's political correspondent, Katy Balls. Henry, let me start with you. Most MPs, if you're going to be a rebel, like to wear the rebel badge with pride. But at the moment, after last night's vote, nobody knows whether they're rebel or not, because you had the Brexiteers who came forward with 4 amendments to kill the Chequers plan. Yep. Suddenly, the Prime Minister flips, so they're no longer the rebels, and the Remainers who come to support her, they are the rebels. It's asymmetric politics.
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing here is what a hung parliament really looks like when the Tory party, the governing party, are very, very divided over Brexit. And it's been said by wise heads in the Conservative Party that the party knows 2 modes. One of those is complacency, the other is panic. And I think we're switching over into panic with the government jumping around, but crucially has managed tonight to get another major piece of Brexit legislation onto the statute book. So actually, although they're not going on recess early, I think the Prime Minister will be pleased this evening.
But Katy, this was a crucial vote that they won tonight, because had they been bound by a customs union, really there was no wriggle room for negotiation.
Yeah, I think there are going to be huge sighs of relief in Downing Street tonight, because at the moment, it's a very grim situation in general for the Conservative Party and for Theresa May, to be honest. But had they lost this vote, there was talk of more no confidence letters going into the chairman of the 1922 committee, who's in charge of the backbench MPs. And there was a real feeling that Theresa May could struggle to actually make it to the recess whenever that is, because people would be so annoyed and have such little faith in her Brexit position. I don't think this means they necessarily have faith, but this is a better result than many had expected.
So, Katy, we had Damian Collins on the programme just a short time ago, and he was making a valiant effort to suggest that because they won this vote, albeit by 6 votes, that puts the Prime Minister in a much stronger position. He was almost kind of making the case that she's just won 3 important votes. Now she can go to Brussels. It's going to be much easier for her to negotiate, and this has a better chance of getting through the EU. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think strong might not be the word I would use. Maybe less weak. It's definitely good for the Prime Minister that she has won this vote.
Ringing endorsement there.
And I think when you look at the customs, obviously, when you look at negotiating with Brussels, Theresa May has been frank with her cabinet for some time that she didn't think anyone in Brussels would take her seriously unless she showed that Parliament would reject a customs union, that they would back her plan. So it's got her over the line a little bit, but I think ultimately the general backdrop here is that she has a feuding party that cannot agree on the direction of Brexit. And even if she does manage to get Brussels to agree to her Brexit blueprint, which is a big if, it's not clear that she have the votes to get that in Parliament. So I think there's little respite for her, really.
I suppose what this shows us, Henry, is that given the numbers in Parliament, the Prime Minister without a majority, any rebellion, whether it's Brexit or Remain, is supercharged.
Absolutely. And I think, as we were just hearing, the big question now is what happens when the Prime Minister takes her Brexit policy, which she managed to bash through her cabinet with resignations at Chequers about a fortnight ago now, takes that to Brussels, and they're probably going to say no and ask for more concessions. Now, I think broadly the government's come up with a compromise position. They went a little bit too far, if you ask me, but broadly it's better to have a compromise that has a chance of bringing the party together, and it's much better to have a plan than to not have a plan. And we spent 2 years without a clear plan. So now she'll go to Brussels, try and put this on the table, and we'll wait to see whether they push for further concessions. But I think that when you look at votes like we've had tonight, when you look at resignations that we've had over the last 2 weeks, it's quite clear on the continent that she has very, very limited space for manoeuvre in either direction. So I hope that Brussels does take this offer that she's putting on the table seriously, because it's probably just about the best offer they're going to get from the UK.
Henry, is the ball now in the Remainers' court? And having lost this vote this evening, would you expect them to go home and decide over the recess, well, we didn't win that, so we'll let that drop and we'll get on board with whatever the Prime Minister is suggesting? Or would you expect them to go away over the recess, work on their tans and come back and say, actually, we're in fighting mood again?
I think it's hard to make a clear prediction about anything at this point. I think that there are so many different options that now look possible, from a very, very soft Brexit, which would keep us in the EEA and the customs union, leave us sort of closer to the EU than Norway.
And that still looks possible, does it?
I think it does, yeah. That looks possible, as does an exit without any sort of deal. Because although there's a clear majority in the Commons for Brexit, there's probably not a majority at the moment for any single option for that Brexit. So it may just get to the point where we basically time out. But I think that as we get closer to the point where we end Article 50, I suspect that the relative attractiveness of different Brexit options will begin to shift. And probably this compromise, if it does manage to fly a little bit with Brussels, will look more and more attractive as we get closer to the exit date and there's nothing else on the table.
But you wrote a piece that I tweeted around last week, Katie, in which you said this is an impossible ask for the Prime Minister because, as Henry says, if they get it past Brussels, and that is a very big if, then it has to come back in October, the ultimate vote, and you've got Remainers in the Labour Party lining up with Remainers in the Tory Party because it doesn't meet their tests, their 6 tests, and you've got the Brexiteers who don't like it one bit. Surely they're just going to vote it down.
I think this is the problem for Theresa May. It's her biggest problem, and this is presuming if everything goes right in the next few months, which is also a really big if still. But right now the numbers just don't add up. It's impossible to see how she gets this deal through. It might be that public opinion changes, but given that we think the deal's only going to get softer, because even if Brussels take it, they're probably going to want a few concessions, it's hard to see who she's appealing to. And Number 10 seem to be calculating that some opposition MPs will put the good of the country first and will help them get this deal over the line. But I think that's a very risky strategy when Labour have been quite honest, really, about the fact that a no-deal scenario, voting down the deal, could be the way to get Jeremy Corbyn in Number 10 because it would probably bring about a snap election.
Exactly. I think it seems at the moment that they're living rather day by day. It's hard to say that there's a clear long-term strategy. I think what they were trying to do is get through to recess, get the key bits of legislation onto the statute book, and they've done that.
OK, Henry Newman, Katie Balls, thanks very much for joining us.